I want you to take a trip of the imagination with me. There's a couple of you in this room that have taken that trip before, and I'm going to ask you to take it one more time. Instead of being here in this gymnasium, we're in a very small hospital room. Instead of there being chairs, there's an examination bed. And on this bed is a young woman named Katie. She was just brought in from the ER and told by the doctor that not only did she just have a miscarriage, which almost ended her life, but because of the medical complications that ensued, she would never be able to have children again. This was a dream of hers. She wanted to be a mother. And now some strange man in a white coat is telling her that's not an option. There's a lot of things running through her mind. There's a lot of things she's feeling, a lot of reactions she could take. But today, I want to talk to you about the most important thing that she could feel, she could experience, and the one that ultimately led her to make the most important decision of her life. And that is, somewhat ironically, the word peace. Today, we're going to be talking about peace and how we can achieve it in our lives. And I want to tell you that peace comes through three things. First, it comes from those who know what they believe. Secondly, those who surrender control. And thirdly, those who are willing to watch it change their lives. First, those who know what they believe. After all, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And the idea of falling for anything at all is terrifying. So it offers us no certainty when we're faced with some sort of difficult situation. There's a man, the father of independence in India, Gandhi, who knew this all too well. I remember researching his life, and one of the stories that particularly caught my interest was the time he was riding as a very wealthy, successful lawyer on a first-class train. Unfortunately, he was kicked off this train because he was of color. Let's just think about this for a minute. An Indian man was kicked off the train in India for being Indian. This would enrage anyone. But instead of fighting back, instead of launching a violent campaign, Gandhi did what we all know he did. He was peaceful about his resistance. And many times during his campaign, he would go back to his home village, and he would talk with his wife, with reporters. He would do household chores. He would figure out what it is he believed. How many times when something stressful happens do we figure out what it is we believe before we push forward? Not a lot of the time. And I'm telling you, peace, the first step to it, is to figure out what it is you believe. But secondly, sometimes you have to surrender control. Sometimes you have to give up the idea that you can influence everything around you. No one knows this better than my personal hero, William Wallace. This was a man who had to give up control of his life multiple times throughout his life. He began as a person who just wanted a peaceful life as a farmer, to have a family, to have kids, and instead, what happened was his wife was murdered, his father was slaughtered, and tons of his friends were arrested or killed for defending the notion of freedom. He had to give up control of his life in that moment. He had to say, you know what, I wanted to control my life and I wanted to make it peaceful, but I can't do that. I have to give up that control that I wanted, and I have to instead do another route that will lead me to peace. He continued fighting for several years, and in the end, he was betrayed by his friends to the British government. They gave him two options: either you surrender quickly, denounce freedom, and we'll kill you quickly, or if you don't, we will make your death slow, painful, and public. How many of us would have been able to choose the second option? I can't honestly say I could, but he did. Again, he gave up control. He surrendered control over his life. He could have somewhat controlled that situation. He could have taken the option where he could at least say, I'll die quickly. But instead, he allowed them to torture him in whatever way they wanted for an hour publicly. And that action led those watching to go on to win Scotland's freedom, to give peace to Scotland. Thirdly, wisdom leads us to know that peace gives rewards to those who follow it, but none more than the woman named Katie I told you about. Now, she had a lot of decisions to make, and she ultimately had to first decide what she believed. She had to figure out what it is I believe. And she decided she believed God was still in control, that he could still provide peace into her life. Secondly, she had to completely give up control. She had to give up that want, that desire to control her circumstances and make it to where she was able to have the children that medically was impossible. And in the end, that decision led her to adopt me and all three of my brothers. And without Katie Halverson's decision to pursue peace in some of the most unlikely, unthinkable in that situation ways, I would not be here in front of you today to tell you Peace is possible in every situation, but you first have to decide what it is you believe. Secondly, give up control because God knows what's best. Thirdly, you will reap those results. You will not regret it. Thank you.